Coming fast and furious out of the White House, so we'll forgive you if some of the other news of the day has been pushed a little further down on your timeline. But fear not, we have assembled three reporters from three of our daily clicks for news and views. So what's been burning up our screens lately? Well, the stop and start development of a Crown Heights Bedford-Union Armory project, the 7 seats up for grabs on the New York City Council, a school that may be closing, and a drug treatment center that's definitely opening in Sunset Park, and that's just for starters. Right now, I'm going to welcome back DNA Info reporter covering Crown Heights and Prospect Heights, Rachel Holliday Smith. Nice to see you again, Rachel.
Nice to see you.
And she's sitting next to Stephen Witt. He's the editor of Brooklyn's best source for political and governmental news, Kings County Politics. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Brian.
And for the first time on our show, the Brooklyn paper's Carolyn Spivack. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So there's a lot going on, and we said we weren't going to do all Trump. We wanted to do a check-in on what's happening locally, but we can't not get the ripple effect of some of the stuff that's happening in his administration. So let's go from Iran and Yemen to back to Sunset Park. We'll end up there eventually. I'm looking at you. You did a story on the protest that happened at Borough Hall recently.
Yes, there was a protest at Borough Hall where thousands of Yemeni Americans from across the borough came out to protest, what's going on with Trump's immigration ban of the 7 countries, including Yemen.
Right.
And particularly in Bay Ridge has a large Yemeni American population.
That's right.
And many businesses shuttered earlier in the day to make it down, to make their
from
voices heard.
12 until 10, they were shut down.
Noon until 8.
Noon until 8, so you couldn't get an egg and cheese or cigarettes to save your life in a lot of neighborhoods. I was actually coming from the gym right across from Borough Hall there, and when I went in, there was like a few flags, and then I came out, and there was a mass of people, and it was beautiful. It was like a real happening with all the signs and the protest, and it was pretty amazing to see.
And people really noticed the strike. It was very effective. I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, oh man, I can't get, my sandwich, I can't get my bagel, can't get my coffee, but they're all in support usually. There's a lot of signs on bodegas that say, we support our Yemen business
refugees
owners.
Welcome here. They don't just limit it to Yemen. But there were also some people who were inconvenienced by Trump's travel ban. Some people from Brooklyn, one from one of the neighborhoods that you cover as well.
There was a woman named Syra Rafi from Prospect Lefferts Gardens who was caught in Iran. She was on vacation with her family, and then she tried to come back. She was in the airport in Abu Dhabi, and then she got stopped by that ban. And she was the person who was the sort of the headline out of that, but she was one of several F1 visa holders who study at CUNY and other schools in the city who were affected by that for sure.
Yeah, and it's talking about rally. The people at CUNY really rallied around their fellow colleagues there. They showed up downtown Brooklyn. They were at the airports. They were all over the place. People have really been activated.
They were definitely all over. Our reporter that covered the rally at Borough Hall, interestingly, and I had a photographer there too, at the very same time they were protesting it, they had a Chinese New Year inside.
Oh, wow.
So Borough President Eric Adams, there was a photo of him with a kimono on, and then he ran out with his, his blue flak jacket.
Yeah, double duty. But we talked about Bay Ridge and some of the bodegas there, but they have a representative there who may not be on the right side of a lot of the votes out there, Dan Holleran. There was a story about him supporting this ban, and it might put him in a little bit of danger when it comes time to voting out there. But he's the Republican guy in Bay Ridge. It seems a little tone deaf to me.
Yeah, Dan Donovan. A lot of people from Bay Ridge groups, Bay Ridge for Social Justice, Bay Ridge Fight Back, all came out downtown to protest Dan Donovan's support of Trump's ban and of a few of Trump's policies, and just feel that he's not listening to his constituents. So they felt it was important that they stand up and turn their back on him.
Yeah. So speaking of standing up, the people at the Bedford-Union Armory, it's a little tempest in a teapot right now that's been developing. I know that you've been doing a lot of reporting around this.
Yeah, for sure, since the plan first came out in 2015, the end of 2015, and Trump apparently is getting into this storyline too. The most recent news there is that Lori Cumbo had a status update meeting last week about this this project. For people who don't know, it's a big military facility on Bedford Avenue in Union that's being converted possibly into housing, a rec center.
Right.
And she basically said that she's not going to support this plan right now because she wants more affordable housing.
That's
but
right.
that affordable housing may not happen if Trump and his administration doesn't give enough funding to the city to support that.
So there's also been a coalition of other folks. This story is kind of shaping up funny because it seems as if Lori Cumbo's on one side, and then you have a host of other elected officials who are acting in concert, who are sort of using a bully pulpit when Lori Cumbo's really the one who officially in the city makes some moves.
Well, Lori, because it's her district
Right.
and it's a city-owned property,
Right.
that it was an armory, but it was gifted to the city.
Mm-hmm.
And Lori originally, who took some money from the Real Estate Board of New York,
During the election time.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And she originally approved of the deal.
Right.
And, everything was all honky-dory, and then Diana Richardson, the local assemblywoman, I think, kind of led the charge, like, hey, there's not any affordable housing here, like.
There is some.
There's some. They're not enough.
Yeah,
And
one
then
of
she
different
led the
mix.
charge for 100% affordable, and then Senator Jesse Hamilton and
Mosley got
Mosley, and who was the other? There was one other.
Yvette Clark.
Oh, yeah, and Yvette Clark.
Congress. Yeah.
So they all jumped on it, and then Lori is all of a sudden possibly facing a re-election, a tough re-election against 8A Fox.
And this was one of the most contentious city council races anyway,
Right.
the one for this
And it was
district.
a four-way before, but now it will be a two-way.
Right.
And A-Day is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So now she's kind of walking it back a little bit, and it will be interesting to see what happens.
And I should say that the process for actually approving this officially hasn't begun yet. She still has to go through ULURP. And Lori has definitely put herself in the position of saying that she's the negotiator. She's not saying she's never going to support this, but she's
Right.
definitely walked it back.
So things did go a little crazy when it was announced that one of the partners in this development is involved in the whole mess on the Lower East Side with the
Slate developers.
Exactly, the developers who flipped old age home and turned it into market rate and luxury housing.
And they're now off the Armory project.
Right.
They're gone.
I think that's when it first got the moniker controversial. So you
I think
can't
that's
say
right.
the Bedford-Union Armory project without controversial.
Definitely
now.
controversial, and not
Yeah.
and since then, but continuing. I mean, there have been rallies outside the Armory. At this meeting last week, there were a lot of people in the audience who were heckling Lori Cumbo and saying we need all affordable housing. I mean, they're really pushing for this. So there's people in the Crown Heights Tenants Union who are pushing for this, people in New York Communities for Change. So there's definitely an organized activist base that sort of
One
wants
of the
this to
more
change.
interesting things, too, was in Kings County politics, you ran part of the letter that those other electeds submitted, and they talked about the formulas, where they were using area median income versus a regional one, and they really seem to be pushing for the affordability based on people who live there and say we need fewer studio and one-bedroom apartments. They really want some community-centered development, it seems like.
That's been a big issue in Brooklyn and gentrification as a whole, is the way they do the AMI, the area median income,
Right.
is they do the whole area, which could include Westchester and
Yeah.
out of actually New York City.
Excuse the numbers.
And yeah, it skews the numbers. And Crown Heights was traditionally a working class neighborhood, and it's
Yeah.
really changed, and it's a nice piece of property. And the people are concerned. The people are getting pushed out.
Yeah.
And as a result, those four lawmakers we mentioned actually Freedom of Information requested the city,
Right.
because they felt they weren't given all the details of the actual project.
Of the financials.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a game changer for that whole neighborhood, and the ripple effects are going to go on if the community really gets their voice in the thing. But we talked about Lori Cumbo, who might be against Ade Fox again, who seems to be a perennial candidate. She may sneak a win out this time. But there's 7 seats that are going to be vacated across the city in the city council, 2 in Brooklyn in the form of Mealy and Gentili.
Correct.
But the Gentili race really seems to be the one to watch. They've got the money and the personalities.
I think they're both to watch. I think
Yeah.
that because one is in Brownsville, which is the poorest district in the borough, maybe in the entire city.
The last uncharted part of Brooklyn,
Right.
the virgin territory for development.
So even though the Bay Ridge is juicy, and it's
Yeah.
certainly a great fight, and it's working class white Brooklyn, which is great, and it's a great fight, The Brownsville is a very interesting election, and I feel it shouldn't be given short shrift because a society is only as good as its lowest,
Working people?
you know, as its lowest rung. I mean, it needs to be served better, and there's 7 or 8 people going there too. So I think they're both very important races.
Yeah, there will definitely be watching. Any other thoughts on the city council races that might be shaping up?
Well, in my beat, this is not an open seat, but Matthew Eugene is actually facing two people who want to take his seat, but he was grandfathered in to have another term. So it's going to be really tough for them to beat.
Would have been out, but he's that Bloomberg hangover from all of that.
That's right, and it's going to be probably tough to push him out, but there are 2 people who are ready to fight for that seat.
And if
it's
one
a
of them
flat push.
drops out particularly, like if it's a 3-person race, the incumbent
it favors
kind of
the
has the
incumbent.
advantage. But if one of the 2 others, who's Brian Cunningham and
Pia Raymond, and Brian actually
And
is.
he's run before Brian Cunningham. We've seen
I'm
him
not
run,
sure actually,
right?
but he was the chief of staff for Lori Cumbo, so
Yeah.
he's been in politics, and Pia Raymond's a longtime sort of activist and active person in Prospect Lefferts Gardens. She's on the community board, and people know her name.
So a lot was made about money in these races last time. You hinted at Lori Cumbo and the real estate lobby kicking into her election campaign, and DNA. They had some. No, I'm sorry, I'm confusing them with the Gazette. They were talking about the money that's pouring in already to these city council races, but that Darlene Mealy race for the East New York seat, there's not a lot of money there, but there are only 2 contestants on the ground now.
Well, no, there's going to be 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 contestants.
There are 2
in it.
officially now who filed their papers, and in the city we get the matching funds, so city council doesn't have to be one of these crazy runaway big money races.
Well, I think that a few things. One, they have independent expenditures, which stems from the Citizen United court case. So even though to run a race like in Brownsville or even Bay Ridge, which, by the way, the Republicans got a shot at, is if you raise $20,000 and you have a 6-to-1 matching,
you get a matching.
yeah, so it's like 120.
Yeah.
120 for city council race or 90. I don't know what the max is. That's a nice penny.
Sure.
But what happens is the independent expenditures, the teachers union, REBNY, some of the unions can pour in do mailings for a candidate of their choice, and that can swing an election.
So candidate of choice, we're going to homelessness, but you mentioned candidate of the choice, which sparked something that I read on your site about this fight for the DA-ship. That was the only borough-wide sort of competitive race that happened last time, and now Brooklyn's Democratic boss is saying, hey, you guys endorse whoever you want. It's a sort of free-for-all now, that Cedio's saying.
Yeah, I think that this is an interesting race because Ken Thompson died, and he has Eric Gonzalez, who's the interim, and he's a Williamsburg guy, East New York guy. He raised an incredible $800,000.
But he just got hobbled a little bit with his own personal finance thing, right?
He's hobbled, and that Frank Cedio was saying support who you want.
It's not a good sign for the acting
Yes,
DA.
and you know, with all due respect to Mr. Cedio, that says something funny. Something's not right when he says, "Oh, support your own guy."
Yeah,
it's not
a Democratic head.
You know.
Okay, so as much as we were meant to stay away from Trump, he seems to bleed into everything, including something that is a funny corollary, an uptick in street homelessness that has a lot to do with all of his rantings about immigrants in Mexico specifically.
Right, yeah, so we're seeing specifically in Sunset Park, there's an encampment of homeless men, about 24 on 10th Avenue and 62nd Street, and we're seeing a lot of hesitance to go into the shelter system because people are afraid they're going to be deported.
Right.
In January, Trump signed an executive order encouraging agencies to step up their efforts to deport individuals for crimes, for misrepresenting themselves on government forms, for abusing public assistance programs. And because of that, even people who are not criminals, they're afraid to go into the shelter system because they don't want to even tempt.
The chilling effect.
They don't want to open that door. So and the result is that people are staying on the streets, and it's creating public safety and health issues.
Yeah, and you said this encampment, this is in Sunset Park where we're seeing this on the street.
Yes, this is in Sunset Park.
Woof. So also in Sunset Park, because we promised we'd talk about a school that may be on its way out after 100 years.
Nearly 100 years.
Yeah.
So St. Agatha School has been it's been a staple in Sunset Park for nearly 100 years.
Yeah.
And alumni, parents, students are just distraught that the school, the Diocese of Brooklyn, is going to close the school in June. And they're citing it's just not financially feasible for them to keep the school open anymore. That the school is in disrepair, that they have to subsidize the cost. Roughly, it costs $3,500 for tuition per student,
Right.
but the actual cost is more like $5,300.
Oh, wow.
So it's being
They're running
subsidized
at a
by the
deficit.
diocese
Yeah.
for over $1,000 per student.
Yeah.
So that tallies up, and it's just not feasible anymore. But parents are really skeptical, and they feel that the Diocese of Brooklyn does have the money to do this, can keep going, but doesn't want to, and they want to instead perhaps use the building for a public school.
Yeah. Well, Betsy DeVos is a fan of our show, and we know how she feels about religious education, so those vouchers might be on their way. Throw out a lifeline. If, in fact, that does happen, I'm sure we'll read about it in either the Brooklyn paper, Kings County Politics, or DNA Info. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it.